Hello, I'm Robert, and a voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And so, as you will all know probably, the metaphorical hailstorm I talked about in the last video, that's already happened. So Trump authorized the strikes, but as I say, there's many of the things that you believe that may lead you to think this is very scary are completely false. So I'm just going to do the previous video that I did again, and it's barely anything to change actually. So first, remember that Trump did not target Iranian civilians, as I explained in the last video. There are no Russian soldiers in Iran. Nobody in the mainstream media that I know of has ever suggested that Russia or China would respond. And nobody on BBC and NBC listening to them right now is suggesting it as a possibility. So you don't need to worry about that. And very interestingly, and this ties up with what I said in my previous blog post about Trump being very risk averse, there have been, checking up in Times of Israel, there have been 24 hours without a single ballistic missile strike from Iran towards Israel. This suggests that Israel has destroyed all of Iran's ballistic missile launchers. It was well on its way to doing that a couple of days ago. It had destroyed over half. And as it got more control of the skies, it's no surprise if it's got rid of all of them. So the risk of a response to this must be very low. And Trump himself, he's saying that he sees this as a strike to end the war. He's telling Iran, you can now take this as the end of the war. Israel is going to stop. So let's hope that Israel does do as Iran is asking them to do. And then this may be the strike that ends the war. It's possible. Or it's not really, it's not a ground war, it's not a war in the sea, it's just exchanging strikes with Iran clearly totally played out now. Now some of these things that many of you didn't know, so I do have to say them again, so if you haven't seen my previous blog post, Russia has no defense pact with Iran. It's got a very weak mutual non-aggression pact. And all this means right now is that Russia's promised that now that US has attacked Iran, it's not going to supply weapons to US. Of course it never would. So that's a totally pointless, totally useless promise. Iran is not in Russia's nuclear umbrella, nor was Syria, nor is Crimea. So we'll come to that in a minute. And another thing I forgot to say in my last blog post, Russia does not support Iran's nuclear weapons program. It never has. It doesn't want Iran to have nukes. There's a very volatile nearby neighbour that has got very little in common in its goals with Russia. No wonder that Russia doesn't want them to have nukes. So don't think that Russia sees any problem with the Iranian nuclear capability being destroyed. Far from it. But it wants Israel to get rid of its nukes too. So that's Russia's position. So now let's look at this graphic that I did yesterday before I knew about this, and then I just made a very small change. I just said at the top why you're safe after the US made a strike on Iran. So nobody will support Iran. Iran can't do anything. And this was extremely risk-free because the B-2 bombers, they flew in from a height of 15 kilometers. They have to be that high. And then he probably sent in 3 B-2 bombers, each with carrying 2 bunker busters. And 6 bunker busters in very quick succession fired into, each one can go through 60 meters of concrete. If they all fired at quick succession at the same point, above an 80-meter and depth of concrete, then very likely they got through that many. So, and the aim of the United States was to destroy the uranium enrichment facilities, destroy all the centrifuges. It's very likely that the actual enriched uranium, up to 60%, is stashed away somewhere else anyway. they would have kept it separate from these facilities. So the United States has achieved what it set out to do. Now, I was saying before that Trump wouldn't do this unless he was sure that there's no risk to an American soldier or civilian as a result of reprisals. So I did this comic exaggeration. He won't do it if there's just one American soldier or civilian was killed, then all the TV networks on the United States would be vying to find their relatives and their wives and children and grandparents and great-grandparents. And as I said humorously, they'd probably go and try and find their second cousin 3 times removed. That means someone's whose great-grandfather is a second cousin of the soldier, or the other way around. Well, the other way around. That some old person who says, "Oh, I remember when I was a kid playing with his grandfather," something like that. So that's Trump knows that if a single American soldier died, or civilian, then it would be over the news everywhere, including very remote relatives being interviewed just because they've got a connection with the soldier that's died. So, and that would play very badly against Trump. So he would only do this if assured to really that there's 0% risk of any US soldier being killed in the US bases in the Middle East. So I expect that's what happened. That is because of the 24-hour and Israel intelligence telling the United States that Iran just can't fire ballistic missiles back anymore. So now, what happens, I was saying in the last blog post, well, if Trump does this, surely he loses all his leverage to try and bring Iran back. Well, maybe not. Because he said in this video, in his broadcast, that they have to come back, or they have to come back to negotiations, or the many other targets that US may hit. So there may be that US knows where other secret targets are that IAEA don't even know, for instance. There may be other targets that Iran wants to protect that the United States knows about. He may even have communicated that to them secretly or something. I think surely Trump's objective is peace here. He wants to bring Iran back to the negotiating table. So we don't know what secret intelligence he had that led to this decision. So I think all these people talking about saying, oh, how he's destroyed the chances. I think we need to have a little bit of humility here and say, well, we don't actually know because we don't have access to whatever secret intelligence he has. So we will discover over the next few days or weeks, what actually the effects of this will be. So I've been listening to some of the people on both the NBC and the BBC, and they're raising things like this, and it's leading me to think maybe Trump knew more than perhaps people are giving him credit for. Either that or he's incredibly dumb. I'm inclined to believe he may have known something. So now we come to this is what they destroyed. There's no radiation hazard whatsoever, as the learned heads are explaining on the TV. So they dropped 6 of these bunker busters, one after another, so they sent 3 B-2 bombers, and that was their main focus. They also fired lots of Tomahawks at the other 2 sites, just to say they've hit them. The Tomahawk cruise missiles, they're incredibly precise. They are far more precise than cruise missiles of other countries. They can literally fly along a corridor. They astonished the world in the Gulf War with videos of them flying along corridors in buildings. So we're talking about incredibly precise missiles there. And so they would have pretty much 0 risk of civilian casualty from those 2. So we're talking about a strike that was focused on the military, extremely precise, 0 risk to civilians, And we can imagine there's probably very few even Iranian people that were actually in Fordo. They'd have been pretty dumb to be in there at the time. It's probably been evacuated, and just mostly the equipment there. So that's the situation. Now, I explained there's no radiation hazard, so if any of you watched my previous video, but I'm uploading this in immediate replacement of it, so I might as well just go through everything that I did before and just talk about it again. So this is a nice story about when Queen Elizabeth, in 1955, and that's a picture of her soon after she was coronation in 1955, then the atomic scientists in the United Kingdom, they gave her a plastic bag with plutonium inside it. And they said, feel this plutonium, feel how warm it is, because it naturally warms itself up through the radiation. Well, plutonium, the only radioactive decay there that is of any significance. There's some other minor things you don't need to worry about, but the most important one is alpha particles, and they're little helium nuclei, and because they're quite big things, they can be stopped by a sheet of plastic or by a sheet of paper. So this is the fuel of a nuclear reactor, or the fuel that is used to make a nuclear bomb, and it is capable of a chain reaction, but before the chain reaction happens, it's not very radioactive at all. You can hold it in a plastic bag, and you won't be harmed by it at all, and it was so safe they gave it to the Queen to handle. And it's the same for enriched uranium. So when we go back up there to this site that I was just talking about, then deep underneath there, probably there's 8 to 10 nukes equivalent of enriched uranium. It's not in there, so it was removed. So all would be left would be whatever uranium was in the process of being enriched in the centrifuges at the time of the impact. The aim was to destroy the centrifuges. A little bit of the enriched uranium would be broken off and end up in the underground bunker. But, I mean, even if it's on the surface, unless you start eating the sand, then it's harmless. And this is 17 kilometers away from the nearest hamlet in the desert. So there's no civilian risk, no radiation risk here. You'd have to be driving over the surface, pick up the dirt and eat it, before you'd have even a minute risk of radiation hazard. And indeed, the far worse risk would be of the heavy metal, that plutonium, it's like lead or cadmium or mercury, and you don't want to be eating it or breathing it. So this is not a radiation hazard, not at all. And I just want to be very clear, the United States did not target nuclear reactors, nor does Israel. And Russia did had some Russian civilians, 200 Russian civilians that were helping Iran with its nuclear reactor program. These were evacuated, and most of these were evacuated a day or so ago. But they were nowhere near this. And I just want to also remind everyone, well, I'll come to that in a bit. It was in the introduction or in this graphic. So they've done nothing to help protect Iran. So Israel has had complete air control. This means that, if I go down a little bit to this graphic, this means that Iran couldn't fly its own fighter jets over its own capital. And Israel destroyed just about all of Iran's air defences in a single day on August 26, 2024. So Iran, of course, has been saying to Russia, look, we need air defences. All the way to the S-300 air defences were destroyed in one night. Do you have anything better? Please send it to us right away. So Russia has its S-400 and S-500s. They're supposed to be a bit better, but probably the F-16s would destroy those too. They haven't shown, they have been not that difficult for Ukraine to target in the Ukraine war and in Crimea. So I imagine maybe it's partly embarrassment that Russia just worried that if they sent all their S-500s to Iran, Israel would destroy those just as easily. And maybe it's just because they just hadn't got any spare from Russia. Now, the important thing to realize is that Russia does not support Iran, does not support the Ayatollah. They never have. There have never been Russian soldiers in Iran helping the Ayatollah to keep in control. Russia supported Assad very heavily. Assad couldn't have ruled at all without the Russian soldiers constantly supporting him. And then when the rebels rebelled, and when the Russians were no longer there to support him, because Putin needed them all for Ukraine, then the Assad regime fell. Well, the Ayatollah is very different. He has never relied on Russian soldiers. He relies on his own soldiers. And so Russia is not involved in supporting Ayatollah at all. And as you see, it hasn't supplied them air defences, and they asked for fighter jets, and the news came that these Su-35 fighter jets had arrived in Iran, and these are roughly equivalent in capability to US F-16s, not the F-35s. F-35s are vastly superior to the Su-35, but the F-16s, they're roughly equivalent to the Su-35. So when the F-16s from Israel, when they started flying over Iran, then everyone was saying, well, where are the Su-57s? Because lots of people believed that Russia had supplied them. It turns out Russia didn't supply them. So Iran asked for fighter jets. Russia didn't give them. It asked for air defences. Russia didn't give them. And what about China? China's been supplying military equipment to Iran for quite a few decades, but it stopped in 2022. By then, the amount of equipment that China was exporting to Iran had dwindled to a trickle by 2022, and then it stopped altogether. So, and then neither of these countries have the slightest interest in supporting Iran now. So, nobody's suggesting it's on TV. It's just things that people constantly ask me by messaging, and they keep saying, well, but Russia's going to join in, and China's going to join in, it's going to turn into a world war. Nonsense. And China and Russia, they wouldn't touch this with a barge pole. That's the thing this is talking about. It's a very, very long pole. It means you're keeping it at a great, great distance, 10 foot long. It's used for if you've been punting in the ISIS in Oxford or in the CAM in Cambridge. If you've seen the punting there, then it's longer than that even, I think. They're used for pushing barges through tunnels, back when they had horse-drawn barges. Very long poles that would push along the canal floor. And the China and Russia wouldn't go within a barge pole of Iran. They're not going to help them at all. And the idea that they would in some way help them against B-2s, well, they obviously didn't. Because B-2s just flew in, dropped their bombs, flew out, and not a peep. And then I checked. I think I've got it in the Russia section here. Let's go down to it. So the the Iranian fighter jets, they're hiding in caves somewhere in Iran. Israel hasn't bothered trying to find them and shoot them down. They're archaic old things that wouldn't stand a chance. If they started flying, the F-16s could see them before they could see the F-16s over the horizon and far away, and just destroy them. So they just hide away in caves. There's nothing else they can do. So now, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Just wanted to share. This is the only story that I found in TASS about what has happened. So interestingly, they didn't run anything from Iran. Russia's propaganda channel, their only story today about what happened is that Netanyahu thanks Trump for striking Iran and says it's a move to change history. That's the only story Russia is running at the moment. It's not too surprising as you would think, because the large numbers of Russian Jews in Israel, there's a lot of interest in Russia about what's happening to Israel, and they've got 1.5 million Russian Jews in Israel, and the Russians care about what happens to them, and they don't want ballistic missiles falling on them. So Putin has a long-term friendship with the chief rabbi of Russia, and he's got a lot of sympathy with the Jews in Russia and in Israel. So I thought it was quite telling and quite interesting. Instead of saying something about Iran and saying Iran's facilities are not damaged, or repeating the Iranian propaganda, then TASS just says that Netanyahu thanks Trump for a move to change history. That is a headline. That is just literally the headline in the Russian propaganda news channel. Netanyahu thanks Trump for striking Iran, says move to change history. That is not the sort of headline you'd expect if you were believing that Russia is an ally of Iran. Of course it isn't. And then we've got this mutual non-aggression pact, and as I said, that's the relevant clause. It says that if either contracting party, Iran or Russia, is subject to aggression, in this case United States attacking Iran, so good, this is where Iran has got this assurance from Russia. So what has it promised? Russia promises Iran that it will not supply missiles to the United States. That's the only thing it's promised. But of course, it's no way Russia would. So this isn't worth the paper it's written on. It's utterly useless as far as Iran is concerned. And then Russia talks about how they're trying to they're talking about how they see a possible way out, and they want to be able to talk. So don't think about Russia's not going to do anything. And then you look at this. It's not in Russia's nuclear umbrella. Well, that's pretty obvious by now. But just to say that even Crimea is not in Russia's nuclear umbrella. And so if you go and look down there, it's safe to conclude that while this is from the Atlantic, which is reasonably respectable, but based on the experience of the past 2 years, now seems safe to conclude that while carpet bombing the Kremlin might force Putin some kind of drastic response, targeted attacks on Russian bases and flying positions across the border from Ukraine highly likely to fuel any kind of major escalation. That was last year. And then, of course, Ukraine has destroyed a significant number of the Russian strategic bombers, legitimate targets, because these fire conventional weapons against Ukraine. And you notice that Putin, he threatened for several days, and then other things came up in the news, and that's how it always is with Russia. He keeps threatening until the news changes and drags people's attention away, and he does nothing. And he did nothing. He just increased the ramp up of his drones, which he was doing anyway. So we may have remembered that when Russia revised their nuclear strategy, and it supposedly gave Russia the ability to use nukes even if it was attacked by Ukrainian drones, and a worried Russian asked Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, this was a while back when 125 drones over Russia was a big number, then she asked, will such cases be considered grounds for use of nuclear weapons? And Peskov said, frankly speaking, there's no need to appeal too much to this document. So again, Putin's new nuclear doctrine, it's not worth the paper it's written on. You just don't. They're not going to use it. They're not going to use nukes. So the reason is you don't use nukes to respond to things. That's a lot of things. I think that's a major thing that people don't understand. Nukes are not intended to win a war. They're not a response that will help you in any way. The only point in a nuke is to deter someone from attacking you. It's like a bodyguard. The bodyguard stands there seeming formidable, and if anyone attacks the Queen, then the bodyguard has failed his work, in a way. No, he's supposed to look so formidable that nobody would even think about attacking the Queen. He'd be there if necessary. Well, that's how nuclear weapons work. So, as I said here, and it's now happened. So what I said there is exactly what happened. There was zero risk because it was flying in at 15 kilometers, and the Tomahawks, they were fired from submarines, nuclear submarines, and fired these conventional Tomahawks. And there must have been refueling bombers and fighter jets, but the B-2s, they wouldn't have needed to get to enter Syria, I don't think, because the B-2 can travel thousands of kilometers on their own. There probably were some other accompanying very high-flying craft of some sort, just to take photographs and give extra advice and so on. But the B-2s could have just flown in to Iran easily without any accompaniment at all. So, and back when Trump did his raid on the chemical weapons facility in Syria on his first term, they were flying low down and they were flying past Russian air defences. And the United States did a deconfliction because they're both fighting ISIS, and a deconfliction with Russia, and Russia wasn't that bothered about the United States destroying Iran's chemical weapons facility. So the United States, they just flew past the Russian the air defences back then and destroyed the chemical weapons facility using deconfliction hotlines to make sure that the Russian radar wouldn't shoot them down. But this time, there aren't any Russian radars even in Syria. There's no Russian equipment in Syria anymore. Even in the Tartar space, even in the airbase, there's no Russian equipment and no Russian soldiers in all of the Middle East. It's all gone. Their big ally was Syria. They never had a presence in Iran. Their big base was the Tartar space. And they've had to evacuate all of that. So Russia hasn't got a presence in the Middle East anymore. And China has got one tiny base in Djibouti near the Red Sea, which is monitoring shipping to help protect Chinese shipping. So China has no chance. Indeed, as I said, just a very quick summary of why World War III is impossible. Then China, the historical reason behind all this, and you could go and read that to find out a lot more about this. So China and Russia were big empires, but they expanded over the land. The Russian Empire expanded over almost all of Northern Asia, Northeast Asia, Northern Asia, all except the western part, Western Europe. Everything else was Russia. And then China, with its big empire, expanded over the west and the south of Asia, and all of that was Chinese empire. Because they had such big land empires, they didn't expand over the sea. Now, the Western Europe, they expanded over the sea, and they did these long sea voyages around Africa. And they took over, they had overseas colonies in South America, North America, of course, United States, Canada, and overseas. And then eventually, when the United States, at the beginning of the century, because it was a colony and not one of the originating countries, it had very few bases outside the United States. But then it started expanding very quickly. At the beginning of the 20th century, it decided it needed bases around the world. So it set up lots of bases in friendly European country colonies. So now the United States has 750 bases, most of them in former European colonies or current European colonies. And so NATO, and then it just so happens that now, as we come to a future where we have planes, we have fighter jets, we have bombers, we have aircraft carriers and destroyers that can travel very quickly through the sea, and nuclear submarines, then the European countries have got ready-made for them bases all the way around the world. NATO is the only country with global force projection. That means, like the way in the United States, they flew their B-2 bombers to Guam. Well, suppose Russia or China wants to do something like that. They haven't got a base like that anywhere in the world, and they could fly them to. So the only countries in the world that have force projection across the sea are the European countries and the United States. And they together, and they're all in NATO. maybe to some extent Canada, I'm not sure. Does Canada have foreign bases? But France and the United Kingdom, they still retain quite a few of their foreign bases. I think Spain and Portugal have a couple or so, but the United States is the record. It's got 750 of them all around the world. So if the only country that could do a global war, and is definitely not going to do it, is the United States. It's the only country that can do force projection. Force projection means that you can both move your forces anywhere in the world and also supply them logistically. And only United States and NATO countries can do that. So even if they wanted to fight a world war, Russia and China couldn't do it. So anyway, so hopefully that helps you there. And China, so that's China. So now let's go and look up at these things. So I've got some things that worry people. So first of all, levels of confidence. So I find understanding levels of confidence seems to help the people that I help quite a lot. So you need to start thinking. So people start saying to me, but human beings are so unpredictable. They could do anything. If you start thinking in terms of levels of confidence, you can't see it. It's not really like that. In some ways, humans are very predictable. In other ways, they're not so predictable. In some ways, they're not at all. So look at this particular case. So I think climate is a very good analogy. So if you live in a temperate region of the world, then summer and winter are very predictable. In winter you get snow, or you get cold weather at least. You get ice. In summer you get lots of sunshine, leaves on the trees. In winter the trees lose their leaves and they're covered in snow and ice. And then you've got day and night everywhere except in the polar regions and above the Arctic circles. So those are in places where they are regular, which is then those are totally predictable, 100%. You're going to have summer, you're going to have winter. Winter always falls summer, summer always falls winter, day falls night, night falls day. That's the highest level of confidence. Then you have things like hail in spring and summer. So in places like Colorado you get hail all the time in spring, but very frequently. But in most places then hail is quite rare in summer, or indeed around the world, but especially in summer. So hail in spring and summer, then in most places if you get that shower, then you think that's an unusual thing. I haven't seen hail in summer, maybe not for years. So hail in spring or summer, that's hard to predict, but it's unlikely. You couldn't ever say it won't happen, but it's unlikely. And then you have famously rain in Britain, say 4 weeks from now. Then everyone has, if you use, especially in cities, people use brollies. Well, you don't know, you wouldn't put your brolly away in any season of the year, because any season of the year you might have rain. So it's completely impossible to predict 4 weeks ago, from now. So now if we go and look at this, then similar certainty to day and night. Iran hasn't got the ERCBMs, it can't develop them, it can't attack US or Europe, it can't fight a world war, it's got no force projection, and so Iran can't fight a world war. Also very certain, because of what I just explained to you now, Russia and China are not helping Iran in any way, and they won't help it if the US strikes Iran, which it has just done. Then, like hailstorms, they are hard to predict but seem unlikely. Trump seemed unlikely to strike Iran when he could use the threat to lead them to negotiations, but now has done so. And I'm saying in this video, probably because something secret that he knows that changes the equation and calculus. That means he's still got a lever over Iran, and something he hasn't done. That you can say to Iran, look, I've destroyed your Fort facility, I know where XYZ facility is, and I haven't done anything to it. Something like that. And then, as unpredictable as rain in UK, when United Kingdom, Israel will stop its strikes, and what precisely it will strike target next while the war is continuing. It now looks as if it might end if Trump has got the right end of what's going on. And then it can't be as intense as the Gaza Strip strikes because of the distance to fly to get to Ukraine, to get to Iran. So, hopefully that helps you understand levels of confidence. That'll help you understand why you're safe. and helps you all to also understand why some things are unpredictable. And not worry that in wars, some things are very unpredictable, some things are very predictable like night and day. So distinguishing those two should help you a lot. I find it helps the people I'm sure I help. Now another thing is impulse control. A lot of people that I help think that leaders are like kids in preschool, in a kindergarten. So if you, in a kindergarten, some kids up to age about 3.5 or 4, they haven't yet learned to master impulse control, and they learn it at different ages. So like in this diagram here, made with a chatbot actually, but you've got 3 kids that are just being, they're just being well controlled, and then they're just looking with puzzlement as this kid is standing on there trying to do a somersault or something and throwing everything in the air. And this kid hasn't yet learnt impulse control, and the other 3 have. So age 3 to 4, kids gradually learn how to do that. Well, anyone who's almost all adults have learned his impulse control. And I used to do teacher training at one point. I'm going to shout, so I'll turn down the volume a little bit so I can do a pretend shout. So I did teacher training. I never actually passed. I said something like, "You at the back, stop that, shut that," and I'd say, "Everyone, stop right now." So I pretend to be angry. I'd say a very angry voice, very loud voice, and I wasn't angry for a minute. I was just acting. It wasn't method acting. I was just acting. So method acting is when you have to stimulate the emotion, but this is just shouting, and you probably do it with a bit of a smile, but the kids listen. So so some people simulate lacking impulse control, but they haven't lost impulse control at all. Well, Putin has the most incredible impulse control. So people think that when he ordered the invasion of Ukraine, it was because he just got very emotional and decided, "Oh well, I'm going to invade Ukraine. I've got fed up with all the peace talks." That is not what happened at all. He decided, we've got very good evidence now from people who can read secret intelligence for Russia, and written a report based on secret intelligence, which of course they can't disclose where it came from and so on. They say that Putin first decided to invade Ukraine in early spring 2021. He may have decided earlier than that. He may have decided in 2020. This means that throughout, when he was doing his first exercises in spring 2021, and then when he went through the second exercises, through all the talks to world leaders, and he didn't tell any of his old generals, except General Gerasimov, who was a very close general to him. Nobody else knew. So imagine the level of impulse control that he had, not to tell any of his generals, and to act as if he was genuinely interested in peace for an entire year, while he planned how best to invade Ukraine. And then he got the spies to go and find out about Kiev, and they came back with rosy-tinted pictures saying to him that the Ukrainians will come out and throw flowers on your tanks if you send tanks to Ukraine, and that they're being oppressed, and that if you can very rapidly take over their government, then the generals will all switch to Russia. And Putin had the experience of very quickly taking over Crimea. So he thought, oh, well, the same will happen with Ukraine as happened with Crimea. And he was so confident that he never told his generals, he never ran, and it wasn't going to be a proper military campaign. He just told them all to advance and attack Ukraine from the north, from the east, and from the south, actually embarking from the sea, from their ships. And then Russia rang up President Macron saying, "It's all out war, they are attacking us from all directions." And Macron was utterly shocked. And so Putin's idea was that while the government of Russia was in a state of shock, while the army was rushing to try and deal with all these attacks from all directions, that they would fly low-flying helicopters and planes along the Dnipro River to the Hostomel airport, and they would have a whole lot of helicopters and then eventually transport planes sending tanks and things, and they would offload all the gear on Ospol airport on the runway, and then they would drive the tanks into Kiev and take over the government very quickly while they were all in a state of shock on the very first day. That was Trump's plan, Putin's plan. And then he thought that all the generals would then switch to Russia, and then he'd use the Ukrainian military to take over the rest of the country and he expected to finish in 2 weeks. And he was so certain of this plan, which we now see is hugely rosy tinted, and he just needed to be able to go online, but instead he asked his spies, instead of going online and doing a Google and looking at what the Ukrainians were saying about their own army and so on. And so that was it. And then the Ukrainians got some secret intelligence just before, enough to send a few soldiers to the Hostomel airport. They were not very well trained at all, not hardened troops, but they were just enough. They shot down some of the helicopters, although they were shot down by the Stingers given by Latvia and Lithuania as they tried to fly along the river. Putin decided his plan is not going to work and just called off the attack. And then he did another try at an air bridge after that. Eventually succeeded, but it was far too late to surprise the government. So that's what happened. So it was a plan that he carefully planned with huge levels of impulse control, possibly for over a year in advance. And then he put it into place. He had no plan B because he was so sure it would succeed. So that's what happened there. And this is not the story of someone who lacks impulse control. It's someone who had extraordinary level of control. So people look at, so the people I help, they look at people like Putin, look at people like Xi Jinping, and they do such strange things that are very different from anything they'd expect the leader of a country to do. So they think this is because of lack of impulse control. It's because of a different ideology. It's a very different thing. A different ideology, and Putin especially is one of the most highly controlled of all the world leaders there are as an ex-spy. And the Institute of Study of War looked very carefully at this. He's a very risk-averse individual. He's extremely calculated, often really prefers not to make urgent, rash political decisions with specific impact on the health of his regime. And so he does these simulated emotions with his bluffs and so on, but he is not, it's just like a teacher, he's not actually, he's got very strong impulse control. Xi Jinping is very similar for a different reason. So Xi Jinping is extremely cautious. The Chinese would never have done anything like the Russian invasion of Ukraine. They are again extremely calculated, but they have better, they're better spies. They're better. They're not so. They don't have the corruption of Russia. They don't have the oligarchs. They are somewhat more knowledgeable than the Russians. They're better understanding of their own limitations, and they are very. They want soft power over the world. They're not very militaristic at all, and you can tell that because China hasn't invaded a single country since the start of this. Just very minor conflicts, fisticuffs on the Himalayas and knife fights in the Spratly Islands. They're not very militaristic this century. They were last century, through to the middle of the century and the second half, into the second half of the century, through to the 1970s to some extent, but not anymore, because they've taken over the entire former Soviet Chinese empire, apart from Mongolia, a few other places that they can't get. And apart from Taiwan, which they have no chance really of taking militarily, and I think they know that. So these are actually very risk-averse individuals, but they have different ideology, so that's why they might seem to some people as if they lack impulse control. They don't. They just have different ways of thinking that to you may seem very strange. So that's what's happening there. So now another thing to talk about, yes, we talked about all that, and the bodyguard. Yeah, far less risk because there are no Russians anywhere in the Middle East. I think I talked about that. So now what else do I have to talk about down here? Yes, so why do politicians say this risks spiraling into a larger war? I don't have a clue. It's something to do with politics. I don't pretend to understand. Sometimes I have some idea. In this particular case, I don't really understand why. I don't understand why they say what they do, but it's clearly not factually based. Iran doesn't have any proxies except the Houthis in Yemen. They've lost their Hezbollah in Lebanon. They've lost Iran. They've lost Syria. I should mention that there. They've lost Syria, which was under Assad, which was a sort of an ally, and there were many Russian soldiers in Syria, and the Russian soldiers had to evacuate from Syria when the Assad regime was toppled. Sorry, the Iranian soldiers, not the Russian soldiers. The Iranian soldiers were in Syria fighting ISIS, and they were sort of allies with Assad. But now that he's gone, Syria is not an ally of Iran. Lebanon isn't. Jordan isn't. Egypt isn't. Iraq isn't. That's under the US, although there's a very small number of Iraq rebels that are loosely tied to Iran. The Houthis in Yemen are about all they've got left. So they are very isolated in the region. Saudi Arabia is not in support of them at all, never has been. So this is one of these things that happens, like with the Iraq War. But this is not going to be like the Iraq War because it's happening only in the air. The Iraq War happened on the ground and in the sea, and there's no possibility of taking over. It's a population of 90 million. It's got a strong military of its own. Even though their weapons aren't much use regarding NATO, they're certainly plenty to keep in control of their own country. This has not destabilised the regime. It's nothing like enough to do that, and that is not the United States' ambition. So this is just about how they attacked Fordo. So that's not really likely. They likely have some secret depot facilities for stashed uranium and centrifuges. I suspect that the United States knows where that is, because this is Daria Dolcikova, and saying that US can usually threaten to destroy facilities, but can't accomplish much by destroying them. I don't think that the United States is hoping to end Iran's capability to enrich uranium by military action. That doesn't make sense. So I suspect that I'm just coming to this thinking over the last few hours since the action. I think there must be something else going on that we don't know about. Iran's got very weak. Well, actually, I should add to that. In the last 24 hours, they fired no ballistic missiles. So they seem to have lost all their ballistic missile launchers. Now, as I said in my previous debate, I'll just say it again anyway. So the level of superiority that Ukraine had over, that Israel had over Iran, because it had F-16s, it said it was very ancient problems that Ukraine had, that Iran had, sorry about coming up with the wrong country from time to time. Well, if Ukraine had the F-35s, which they are just about as advanced over the Russian fighter jets as the F-16s are over the ancient Iranian fighter jets. They're kind of like they're the fifth generation. They're next. They're I say a quantum leap or whatever it is, whatever that means, whatever that might be supposed to mean. But a complete change of type of aircraft and technology that can see the Russian fighter jets from much further away than the Russian fighter jets can see them. Just as the F-16s can see the ancient Iranian fighter jets much further away than they can see them. And so, in the same way, it shows the capability of air control. And NATO's much superior ability in the air would allow, if the Ukrainians had what NATO has, by the way of air capabilities, they would have air control over the whole of the occupied region of Ukraine and over the border regions of Russia. And then the Russians, their campaign would just collapse because they're not trying to defend their own country. And in that situation where it's an invader, and if the invaded country has complete air control the other way around, then you're very likely to give up your invasion. So this shows why Russia is never going to attack NATO. It knows very well, and that's why Putin keeps bluffing to stop NATO, Russia, Ukraine's allies in NATO from giving it the equipment that. So, for instance, if Ukraine had the B-2 bombers, if it had the F-35s, if it had the Tomahawk cruise missiles that the United States used in this attack, Russia would have no chance in its invasion of Ukraine. It would be lost. It would leave tomorrow. So this helps you to understand why Russia is never going to attack NATO. So I hope that would help too. And there's no risk of the conflicts joining up. United States has very little interest. China has no interest in Israel. Russia, if anything, is somewhat in support of Israel, although it's tried to become pally with Iran because of wanting Iran's missiles. But now that Iran is being attacked and it's no longer much use to Russia, it may well start coming in on the side of Israel again. Russia has no interest in Taiwan. China has no interest in South Korea. And North Korea has no interest in any of those other countries. None of them have any interest in any of the others' political objectives. They only have a vague alliance of being, to a certain extent, anti-Western. But China is also very dependent on its trade with the United States and with Europe. And it's got a strong trade partnership with Ukraine, for that matter. So even that is not very strong by way of a unifying pattern. So no, these conflicts are not going to join up. And none of them have the ability to fight a global war, even if they were all allied together. And they don't have these 750 bases that the United States has. And now, just a very quick summary of why there's no risk from Iran itself. Well, it should be pretty obvious. It's ballistic missiles. I think, realizing it can't even fire its ballistic missiles anymore. It can't travel on the ground to Israel. Israel can't do a ground attack on Iran either, because the countries in between just won't let either party go through. United States, with its bases everywhere, it could invade across to Iran pretty easily. Israel can't do that. And the United States is not going to do a ground war of invading somewhere here to try and attack Iran. And Iran has United States has several naval vessels there guarding the Strait of Hormuz. And it could very easily do an attack on Iran, but it's not going to do that. That's not their idea. I think it's pretty clear that Trump's idea is just go into a single strike, that's it over, show how powerful the United States is, and then try and persuade Iran that that's the end of it, and it's got to go to negotiation. I think that's what's happening. We'll see in the next few days. And then this is about how wars in the Middle East always stay in the Middle East. So this was when they were attacking Iraq. And that was Kuwait, that was Iraq. Most of the fighting was there. It was the land, sea and air. There were countries from every continent of the world were fighting in Iraq. But Iraq couldn't fight any of those countries, because it doesn't have any bases either. I'm not quite sure of the historical reason why it is with the Muslim countries, but they don't seem to have foreign bases as well. None of them do. I haven't actually looked into the history of that as to why it is. I know there were Islamic empires, but I think they must have been land empires, very much like the Russian and Chinese ones. And they don't seem to have established a pattern of sea routes or overseas beach bases either. Anyway, for whatever reason, the various Muslim countries, they don't have overseas bases either, the historical ones from where Islam started. So there are places like Islamic countries further afield, like Bangladesh, but I don't think that really counts as a colony. I'm not sure. Anyway, I haven't looked into the history of that. So anyway, let's go and look further down. So now, this is about the Iranian missiles, but I think this slide is hardly even needed now. Let's go a bit further down. This is about why Iran can't have ICBMs. Ah yes, this is connected to the idea of Iran having a secret nuclear program. So even if it were to develop a nuclear, let's go a little bit back to front, maybe I should change the order here. So its nuclear material is just in the form of very hot heavy gas turned solid when it goes cool. And if you decide to make a weak nuke, it's likely 2 years because it fit them on a missile and be useful as a deterrent for Israel, because they can't get to Israel with its fight with its bombers. So this is about the idea that I just want to kind of fact check this idea that Iran actually wants to make a nuke, and that it's actually trying to do it. I think there's no suggestion that it really is. And that's not really what's going on here. The Ayatollah is very clearly not interested. And so I don't think I need to warn you now, say to you now, there's no chance of its flying ICBMs. The US is, hopefully that's pretty clear now. But it can't shoot fire further than there. It had its missiles just in order to hit Israel from as far away in Iran as possible, not to try and hit distant parts in Europe. It's probably not got any missiles left that it can actually fire at US bases in the area. And then it never developed ICBM technology. So the ICBMs are needed to travel very fast through the atmosphere in order to deliver a missile before it can be shot down. That's why it's so streamlined. And it could easily develop an aeroshell that would take minutes to land. But that's useless because it gets shot down. So Iran has not even started on developing an aeroshell, and it's got nowhere near ICBM technology. If you come to actually develop a nuke on a missile, then it would have to also withstand the shock of being ejected into space on a ballistic missile, and that can be the thrust of the rocket going off, all the juddering and vibration and so on, and a nuclear missile, which is a very delicate piece of apparatus, has to withstand having a rocket engine and the juddering of the motor and everything going off into space. And that takes, I think 2 years is actually quite a fast estimate. So there's no way that Iran could have a nuke that could do anything. Now some people start worrying about, but Iran could do a terrorist attack. Like I've got a section about that here somewhere. That would be like 9/11. Well, Iran, it's a different type of Islam, let's go and look at it. Oh dear, some of these things, they need to refresh, I think. Yep. Now let's just go and look. Search for ISIS. Right, yes, that was the section I wanted to talk about. So, Iran, when it was an ally fighting in Syria, it was fighting against ISIS. And it's very much against terrorists, against civilians. And it does do assassination of Iranian opposition figures abroad, but it sees the sort of thing that ISIS is doing as an abomination, really, an objection. ISIS calls it jihad. Jihad is actually a term for kind of peace process, and it's very much perverted by ISIS and by Al Qaeda, and they were acting against the most central beliefs of Islam. So Iran is militant, and Iran did support Hamas, but they were somewhat uncomfortable, must have been somewhat uncomfortable association with what Hamas did against civilians in the Jews, because that is not what Iran does at all. Now, I must say I'm not doing this in order to support the Iranian regime. It's very harsh, especially towards women. It is very severe. It is assassination of political opponents. I'm not saying doing this to support them. I'm doing this just to help people who get scared that Iran might do a terrorist attack on the United States. It's shown no ability to do these sort of things anyway, of like hacking and so on. It just doesn't seem to be good at that. But it is also not a country that's not its style at all to do anything like ISIS or 9/11. That's not. Iran wouldn't do that. It would horrify its people. So no, Iran is not going to do that. It's a country of 90 million. It's Persian civilization, and it's just not the sort of thing it's going to do. Even with all this militancy that it does, which states people are very uncomfortable with, some of them, but it would be the end really if it started doing stuff like ISIS did. So you need to make a distinction there. So now let's go and have a look. And the Ayatollah, so Iran is one of the few absolute monarchies really, in a way. So in Iran, the Ayatollah has the final decision about everything, even more so than for Putin in Russia. He makes the final decision about every legal decision. Anything to do with religion, anything to do with the military, anything to do with any laws passed in government. No laws can be passed without the Ayatollah approving them. So there's a certain amount of independence, but he has the last word on everything. And so it's very clear that the Ayatollah of Iran, he does not want nukes from what Iran does as a country. So every year, only Israel votes against the resolution to establish a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. And then the 3 extensions from Argentina, Cameroon, and naturally the USA. But they just abstain, they don't oppose it. And several others don't vote. So Israel somehow manages to give the impression that it is standing up for peace and that it is the one that is making sure that the Middle East stays nuclear weapon free, when it is the only country with nuclear weapons in the area, and it is the one country standing in the way of a nuclear weapons free Middle East. So it's quite back to front how Israel talks about it. So I'm just again saying this to help you understand Iran's situation. I don't want to kind of step in politically here, but to help you understand where Iran is coming from. So Iran is, Israel is the only country that does not declare its nukes to the IAEA. It doesn't say that it has nukes. Everyone knows that it does. And it constantly votes against establishing a nuclear-free Middle East. So here all these whys are the people who vote for it, year after year after year. All these countries say, let's establish a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. Israel votes no. Argentina, some countries don't vote sometimes, and Argentina, Cameroon's, and United States abstains. Now look again at India, which is of course a nuclear weapon state, but it wants to get rid of nukes as quickly as possible. So every year, India calls for intervention to prohibit all nukes. And in 2024, for instance, it was again a majority vote by far in the UN General Assembly. So 121 countries voted to call for an immediate convention to prohibit all nukes. 49 voted against, 12 abstained. And Iran and everyone else in the Middle East except Israel was one of those who voted for this convention. I think everyone else in the Middle East, I should double click. Look, here's not everyone in the Middle East, just about everyone. Yes, I did blue lines for it. I shaded this in. Yes, I think everyone in the Middle East except Israel voted for that. India, China, the Stans, Mongolia, various countries in Mexico, various countries in South America, most of Africa, all voted to hold an immediate convention on the prohibition of nukes. And then, if you look at the nuclear-free zones, then those are covered just about, if you could take the equator, which is about there, just slightly south of Sri Lanka, I think, then I think everywhere south of the equator, I haven't actually put the equator on that map, I think everywhere south of the equator, or just about everywhere, is a nuclear-free zone, apart from maybe a few islands. So I think few people know that. And then these countries, then if you look at the countries that treat on the prohibition of nukes, then we get a few in the Northern Hemisphere too. So Ireland is a ratifying party of the treaty to prohibit nukes. and a few other examples in Europe. There's the stands. So these are the stands, all except Pakistan and Afghanistan. All the other countries that end stand, Persian word for land. And they are in both a nuclear weapon-free zone, and they belong to treaty period nukes. So does Mongolia, and an awful lot in the southern hemisphere. So, and Hans Blix, he's a former nuclear weapons inspector and former head of the IAEA. He was head of the IAEA and chair of the Weapons of Mass Destruction Commission. So he's a pretty hard-nosed person. And he says that despite blips like Gaza Strip and Ukraine war, and he will now say, of course, this conflict between Israel and Iran, that the world is moving in the direction of less conflict. And he foresees an end of all wars. And he says that we're going to stop territorial wars. And there are no longer going to be wars over territory. But I expect, maybe even within my lifetime, and probably within the lifetime of the younger people watching this, we will no longer have wars anymore. And replaced by non-lethal competition like the Olympics. And then the century, if you look at the end of the century, it's quite possible, but it's certainly a possible path, if we choose to go there, which we may well do, to scrap not just most nukes, but nearly all missiles. There are people who look, scrap all missiles, scrap ballistic missiles. There are people, groups that want to do that. And it is actually a plausible thing to do in the future. So I have a talk about that there. Now these are the polls I did, and I think I've covered most of the things. So this is about Iran, and Iran doesn't have nukes, and Iranian Air Force can't fly over its capital city. Oh yes, so I just want to say, like, if Iran tests a nuke, and it's amazing how many people think that if you test a nuke, that the entire world will go radioactive. Well, of the younger generation. Well, when I was a child, then every week, on average, there was a nuclear test going off somewhere in the world. And the world didn't go radioactive. It didn't become uninhabitable. I think I get this idea from, I don't know, comic books or movies or games or something. I don't know. But it seems to be quite a common belief. And of course, North Korea did some underground tests, but even we had lots of airburst tests when I was a child. And nuclear radiation doesn't spread very far. It only goes with the wind. It's very heavy dust. It falls out of the sky. Within a few tens, hundreds of kilometers, it's gone. And then it loses its radioactivity very quickly. And the biggest hydrogen bombs, the most powerful bombs, they're least radioactive, especially if they don't interact with the ground. The biggest hydrogen bomb ever let off, the Tsar bomber, then within 24 hours, the scientists were actually on the site where it exploded without protection, because it produced so little radioactivity, because it's mostly hydrogen and it didn't touch the ground. So yeah, I covered quite a lot of this. Anything else of these common myths that I've missed out? Iran's navy can't even reach the Mediterranean. That's kind of obvious. It's not even a radiation hazard locally. Nothing in the Middle East will lead to World War III. Iran doesn't have ICBM technology. I think I've covered most of these. Let's see if there's anything here that I haven't covered. Oh, I haven't said anything about oil prices. Nobody voted for that in that, but it's a question that people have asked for from time to time. So the US Navy is very close to the Hormuz Strait, and if Iran was to respond to this, which seems highly unlikely in the circumstances given how very weak it is, but suppose it was trying to block off the Strait of Hormuz, then the Ukrainian Navy would very quickly open it again, and be really pretty hard, because the US Navy, not Ukrainian, what I was saying, the US Navy is it's just sitting there next to the Hormuz Strait, ready to unblock it if Iran tries to block it. So they're prepared for that. And the impact on the oil prices, even if it was blocked up for a few days or a week or two, then there's the US National Reserve of oil that they would unblock in that situation. There's OPEC countries would come to the rescue and various other things. So so that's the only thing I don't think about there. Let's look and see if I've done all this. I did say it doesn't assist the Ayatollah militarily. So Israel's complete control of the airspace, Russia. Yes, I think I've done that. Anything else I haven't done? More Jews have immigrated to... I didn't talk about that, but it's not that important. Only got 1% vote for that. More Jews have immigrated to Israel from Russia than any other country. And there are 1.5 million Russian Jews there, including their families. Nearly 1 million without the families. Anything else I haven't done? Said Russia couldn't protect Assad's regime in Syria from rebels, mostly in open-top trucks. I think I said that. Not only seaport in the Med. Yes, I said all that. So I've covered all those points, I think. So you can look at the previous debunks. And right, so that's the video finished, I think. I'll upload it. I thought I'd say, there's kind of a thing about bloopers, that you get at the end of a video. So I thought I'd share this blooper that, not by me, but by the chatbots. I might help people who are scared of chatbots. I do, of course, say if I make any bloopers in this, and I'll put comments and so on. And but I remember that diagram I got at the beginning. That maybe took me half an hour to get that right. That drawing for the second cousin 3 times removed, because I couldn't find a drawing of it. I thought I'd just go online and someone, surely it's a kind of one of these things you see. I think it's a saying of some sort. I haven't looked it up. If you talk about a very remote connection in the United Kingdom, you tend to talk, well, you're like, my second cousin 3 times removed wouldn't even be interested or something. You wouldn't know a thing about it or whatever. So I think it's a bit of a saying, I'm not sure, or whether it's a family thing or whether it's more general. So I looked it up to see if I could see a thing about a second cousin 3 times removed. I couldn't find a diagram, so I had to get a chatbot to do it. It would take a lot of work with doing it with the unlimited graphics I have. And so I first of all tried ChatGPT, and ChatGPT say, yes, sure, I can do that. And this is what it produced. And I thought that was rather amusing, where you are the son of your second cousin 3 times removed. It's so bizarre. And this very complicated thing it produced. And then this is one of Perplexity AI's most baffling attempts. It's got grandparent 1, grandparent 2, grandparent 2. It's got several copies of grandparent 2. And it's got, I think, 4 grandparent 2s. And 1, 2... grandparent 1, it's got 3 of those. And then parent 1 comes... parent 2 has got 2 copies. They're not looking the same either. And somehow it thought that this, there's no thought going on, of course. It's just generating a graphic from a prompt. But that graphic was somehow meaninglessly connected to the prompt. Draw a family tree of a second cousin 3 times removed. The second cousin 3 times removed goes both ways. So it's 3 generations, your second cousin, and then you're both 3 times removed, whether it's the younger one or the older one. It's still the second cousin 3 times removed. So, anyway, that was just rather funny. But I thought that would help people to help some people. I get lots of people worrying about AI, and they think AI is going to take over the world or something, or they think that AI is going to be so good at jobs that we're not going to have anything for humans left to do. I see no sign of that whatsoever. I think they're going to be better and better doing more and more things, but I don't think you're going to think they're going to continue to have very amusing and extraordinary glitches now, because there's no understanding there. It's not, they don't have semantics built in. Nobody really understand. They understand sort of how they managed to. They've got so the way a chatbot learns how to follow instructions, learns how to count in a rather not very good way, learns how to do things is that you feed it billions of pages of information. And out of that, somehow, it extracts stuff like this. And somehow it gets it right sometimes. By spotting patterns in it all. It's very unlike the way a child learns. You don't teach a child how to write by showing it a billion pages of writing, do you? Billion websites. So whatever it's doing is based on spotting patterns in huge amounts of data. It's nothing like what a child does. It doesn't understand in the way that a human does. It doesn't have a clue. Humans' child learns very quickly with very little information and very few words it actually hears. To speak a language, and it attaches meaning to the words. And we are nowhere near that. We've got nothing that's even remotely like the way that a human child learns. And we've got no understanding, no memory. They don't remember anything. They've got no introspection. If you ask a chatbot how it does something, it goes and looks for shared patterns on the internet in the research that researchers write about why chatbots do things. It can't integrate its own memory. It's got no memory, it's got no reasoning. Anyway, that's for another video. But I thought I just thought that's rather funny, and I might use that in the future for my chatbot anecdotes to help people be less scared. Anyway, so let's go back up to the top of this. I don't want to get distracted too much. And hopefully some of you are a little bit less scared now. And you can realise why you're... Let's bring that up. I'll just bring that up for a little bit at the end. That is our defining graphic. And so we can go back to a summary. So I've enlarged on a lot of the things I cover there. And hopefully now you can see that you are safe from the US strike on Iran, that Russia and China have done nothing to help protect and will not protect it. Iranians are probably not able to hit any base in the US base or UK base. That's probably why the United States did it, because they already knew that. So he must have known that he wouldn't have authorized this unless he thought the risk to civilians was 0%. So I expect no retaliations from... I know the learned heads are saying, some of them are saying, look, what is Iran going to do next? I think Iran knows it can't do anything back. And I think US knows that. And so we'll soon discover what happens, but that's what I expect to happen. And that the Israel, it depends somewhat on Israel. Netanyahu, to a certain extent, wants to destabilize the Iranian regime, but he probably knows that's impossible. And the United States certainly does not want to do that. And so it's really whether Trump has the leverage over Israel to stop them altogether. But Israel does have the discipline to stop. It stopped and arranged a peace treaty with Lebanon. So, and there's almost really no more fighting going on there. And there's, it does have the potential to stop. So I think Netanyahu may well stop when Trump tells him to. And that then would be how Trump manages to this balancing act of being engaged in a war, but not really, because it's only one strike. So he's not starting a new war, he's stopping it. If the optics can be the United States, by doing a single strike on Iran, well, not a single strike, but a single sortie on Iran, stop the war, then that will be good optics for Trump. And I think that's probably why he's doing this. And I think that's what he expects. And as I said, my first reaction was this: Trump is being incredibly dumb. I didn't think he was as stupid as this. But then on reflection, I think he must have secret intelligence that we don't know about. Because I don't think he's as dumb as he seems. He does do some very odd things, and I'm not supporting him at all. There are many things he's done that I'm very opposed to personally. I don't want to go into details, but I don't think he's as dumb as he seems on some things. So I think it's possible that this has ended the war. We'll see. Let's hope that it is. It has. So that's it. I'll put the link to this in the video description, if you've got any questions, I've got contact details at the end of this blog post. I will upload this video, and then also do, if you're coming on this on the internet, first time you've seen this, then I'll just do a shout out for our Doomsday Debunk blog on Facebook, and the numerous debunkers there that debunk World War. We've got some topics we've only got one or two, or in some topics like legal case in the United States, I'm the only one. But World War, we are rather blessed at the moment with having a number of very experienced, really good people who are helping us debunk on World War. So that's very welcome. And do join the our Facebook group if you can help us with debunking, or if you're scared and you need help. Or if you are in the mental health professions and you are used to helping people who are very scared and panicking and sometimes suicidal. And we have a very large number of people who are autistic and a very large number of people who are bipolar in our group. So people who are used to communicating people who are either autistic and bipolar, then you know how to talk to them, then that could be very useful in our group too. And we have, naturally, because we are there to help people who are scared of many things, as I said in the introduction to this video, we naturally have lots of people with panic disorders, lots of people with OCD. We do not offer therapy. We have to draw a firm line there. We're not therapists, we are fact checkers. They have therapists. We don't do diagnosis or anything like that, but we do welcome anyone who is useful who is used to talking to people who are very anxious or suicidal, or people who are autistic or got bipolar disorder and so on. Then sometimes we have communication difficulties, and you could be very useful. And also, if you're able to help people who are panicking with a few words of just comfort, just ordinary people, ordinary folk, don't need to have any experience of anything. We're just sympathetic and empathic, and help people who've got with words of comfort when they're panicking. And think of them like first responders when there's an awful lot going on in the group. So a shout out for our group, both for if you need help and if you're good at debunking and you want to help us help scared people like I'm doing with this video, then we welcome experienced people who can do proper fact checking and do not do it with a political slant, but just to help scared people, helping them to access the facts like I'm doing in this video. So anyway, that's that, and I'll save this and upload it.